You may have found yourself wondering at some point, how did assessment become such a big focus in higher education? The truth is, assessment started small. Individuals have long advocated a systematic approach to evaluating the success of an education program. These individuals wondered how a program could accurately evaluate its students' abilities and skills. In 1996, a group of assessment experts brought together by the American Association for Higher Education sought to answer that question. This group wrote 9 principles of good practice for assessing student learning. The last principle stating that through assessment, educators meet responsibilities to students and to the public. Nearly 10 years later, the Spellings Commission commented that assessment must be completed by the institutions or outside interests would do it for them. The Spellings Commission was formed in the fall of 2005 to study the future of higher education. The Commission's most notable recommendation was to increase the accountability of higher education institutions, specifically through the assessment of student learning outcomes. And so it was, a relatively small field that had previously been advocated by a select few seeking to improve the education that students receive, was now pushed to the forefront of higher education's focus. Assessment experts advocate that assessment should not occur because programs have to, but because they want to. So, what can assessment do for a program? The University of Central Florida says that assessment should be used to improve, to inform, to prove, and to support. Assessment is the process of investigating the program's influence on student performance so that informed decisions can be made to foster improvement. No matter how good they may be, all programs can improve. The goal of assessment is to determine where there are weaknesses in student learning and seek ways to advance. Assessment can take many forms, including standardized tests, observations of student performance, evaluations of student work, and surveys. Assessments can be both standardized and homegrown. Ideally, assessments will ask students to demonstrate their knowledge or skills. Program assessment can be structured in a variety of ways. Some programs choose to have only one person responsible for the collection and evaluation of evidence, but a more inclusive approach is regarded as being the best. The Office of Assessment at the University of Kentucky recommends that program faculty, department chairs, and the DUS or DGS take part in the assessment process. Of course, one person should be designated as the coordinator of the process, which will help to keep assessment on the table instead of being pushed aside for other tasks. You will need to designate an assessment coordinator for your program in your final assessment plan. Just like any other field of study, assessment comes with its own set of vocabulary. Some of the words will be repeated often in this course, and for the sake of clarity, they need to be defined. A written list of these definitions is located in the course's resources. For the duration of this course, assessment will always refer to program-level assessment. If there is ever talk about other assessment types, like course level, that will be explicitly stated. Learning outcomes are statements of learning expectations. Some programs may choose to use the terms learning goals or learning objectives in place of learning outcomes. For the purpose of this course, these 3 terms mean the same thing. Sometimes these terms are defined differently by accrediting bodies, but because there is not a set standard for how accreditors use the words outcomes, goals, and objectives, we will assume that they are all equal. When assessing student learning outcomes, it's necessary to gather evidence. There are 2 types of evidence that will be discussed in this course: indirect and direct. Indirect evidence is data from which you can make inferences about learning, but students do not demonstrate actual learning. Examples of this type of data include, but is not limited to, surveys, focus groups, exit interviews, grades, and institutional performance indicators. Direct evidence shows student achievement through the measurement of their performance of knowledge and skills. Direct evidence can be gathered using tools like capstone experiences, score gains between entry and exit, also referred to as formative and summative assessments, and substantial course assignments that require performance of learning. When programs write their student learning outcomes, they should also determine a benchmark or target for those outcomes. A benchmark is a set standard for measurement, especially when compared to other like institutions or programs. Benchmarks work well when you know the assessment results of another institution and when you are using the same or similar assessment processes. A target is a goal for achievement. Targets can be internally or externally set and should be difficult to obtain but achievable. A target of 100% is probably not achievable if you're actually measuring something that's valuable. Let's review. You've learned a bit about the background of assessment and some basic terminology. Now it's time to test your understanding.